Hello, Canada, and welcome on into Vamos, brought to you by Degree right here on One Soccer. Andy, Ollie, Alex with you. We are hours away, guys, from a massive game, a huge game. I will ask you momentarily where this game ranks in the game of all games and if Canada could maybe, possibly pull off a victory, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Ollie, you are in New York. You have made the journey. You are there. What are you seeing? I mean, are we seeing the throngs of Messi fans? Is everything white and sky blue, or is everything like a calm before the storm? What's happening?
Well, I don't want to start with too obvious a statement, but New York City is a very big city, and so it somewhat dilutes the impact of maybe individual events a little bit that you see. So there's definitely some Argentina shirts around, a lot of Messi shirts. Obviously, you can see that they're starting to arrive, and obviously there's going to be, I don't want to say the full 82,000. I'm sure there'll be some very loyal Canadians in the stadium, but a large part of that crowd is going to be cheering for Argentina and Messi, and that's kind of the ratio that I've seen so far. But still waiting to see, the real kind of party start today.
So yeah, okay. So you're saying New York, big, flashing neon lights, people are
Lots of other things
shopping.
going on.
Lots of other things happening. But either way, New York itself is just pomp and circumstance. So you feel like something special is happening, and we know it's going to happen in a few hours. So I'm going to start with you again, Ollie, and let's just have a little bit of fun here of what you think. So give me one reason why you think Canada could win tonight, and then I want you to give me one reason why you think they could not. So Ollie, why could they win?
They could win because it's 90 minutes, and I think this Canadian team, again, this is going to be very obvious, but number one, they have the ability to score. We've seen that they can create chances, and not just in the past three games, but even in that first game against Argentina, they did create some danger, and I think they can do that again tonight. And secondly, I think they can at least keep it tight defensively. It's tough to deal with the level of opponent you're going up against and the moments of quality they can provide. But they've only got to play to, potentially get to penalties for 90 minutes instead of 120. And I think they can keep this close. So that I think is where the hope is that Canada is competitive enough in this game to nick something, again, to get it to a penalty shootout, and then you never know. It's going to take a massive effort. It's going to take the biggest effort, I think, and would be the biggest result clearly in the history of this men's program. So, yeah, no insignificant task. But I don't think I'd be surprised if Canada gets completely blown out and played off the pitch tonight.
Alex, what's a positive here that you feel they could win?
Yeah, I think, beyond on the field and the fact that they've been good defensively, which always gives them a chance. I've liked how they've gotten better each game. That's always a good sign. It's not been stumbling through the tournament. It's been growing into the tournament. Played their best match in their last match. That's the kind of stuff you want to see. Especially 90 minutes. Defense isn't very important. They haven't been conceding many goals that will give them a chance, especially if that offense can get firing at the level that they know they can. They just haven't been able to put the chances away. And then there's a simple thing called belief. It helps, right? The fact that Canada was in a tough situation against Venezuela, the crowd was against them. They're in penalties. They got guys pointing lasers at them. They missed some key shots. Yet it was just, all right, like water off the back mentality. And hey, a lot can be said about mentality. If you're going to pull off an upset, right, you just got to believe. You pull out your inner Ted Lasso, and I think Canada has a bit of that in their pocket right now.
I'm hearing a lot of intangibles. We feel like they can win, if they do believe in it. But you're right, though. Like, they are better defensively. If I could just offer up, I think, how you kind of get it done too is you win that midfield. I know it seems pretty obvious, right? But you could win if you just cut off any kind of service to the guy named Messi, who I have a feeling, Ollie, will feature in your why could Canada lose tonight?
Yeah, well, that was a big reason, I think, why they lost the first game. As much as the second half did turn in Argentina's favor, on more broadly, it was Messi producing things that only Messi can. That's always the danger against this team. But I would say it goes beyond that with Argentina as well. Like, they're a team that's they've won back-to-back tournaments. The mentality of this group is unbelievable. They seem to thrive in these types of moments. They seem to get better as tournaments go on, and they're playing under more and more pressure. And the pressure that they played under at the 2022 World Cup because of the Messi story was, almost incomparable, I think, in recent international tournaments. Incredible that they have none. So that is what Canada is going up against.
All right, Alex, what about you? Why could Canada lose tonight?
Yeah, it's I guess kind of pick your choice, right? I think like even they could play their worst game today, Argentina, worst, terrible, and it's just Messi gets one chance, like find a way to break you down with that
Mm,
perfect pass, that one moment. And for Canada, I think a game like this requires an incredible level of concentration that a lot of good teams with good defenders have failed. Like it's something where it's genuinely as much a battle of wills of yeah, you can go toe to toe with Argentina. Yeah, you can get your chances. Canada saw it firsthand. They were there in the game, but you don't take it. This Argentina team, they're just so savvy. They wait, and boom, they beat you at that one moment from their superstar. And of course, there's also just the fact of the team around him. It's built for Messi. Like it's built to withstand this. And what's always fascinated me about a lot of these national teams. It's always like you see guys out there, they're willing to fight for the badge, and these Argentinian players are definitely willing to fight for their badge. They love their country, but it's like those players on this team worship Messi. They will go out there and die for Messi. And I think that also
mm,
gives them an edge, the fact that psychologically, like they're just such a machine and that's a tough
mhm.
machine to crack.
Yeah, and for me, we're going to see a good battle of the goalkeepers here. I mean, obviously between Crepeau, who's had a stellar tournament, but Emmy Martinez, who is fantastic. I think we can all agree Crepeau will probably be tested more. But something about Argentina, it's their depth off the bench. I mean, Lautaro Martinez comes on in and scores a goal. Like they have these guys on the bench who can come on in and still be factors when it comes to goal scoring. And that leads me into that very first game that Canada played at this tournament, group stage game. It was against Argentina. They held them off the score sheet in that first half. I'm not going to go back and say Argentina took a little bit more time than they should have at halftime, whatever. But whatever they did, they adjusted, but they also made substitutions. And then Messi, who they managed to silence in that first half, doesn't matter. Substitutions are made. They figured things out. He assisted. He didn't score, but he assisted on those two goals. And this is actually what Canadian head coach Jesse Marsh had to say when dealing with Messi.
We didn't do well enough with Messi last match, right? And he was able to run free at our goalkeeper too much. We won't man mark him. Okay, we will certainly, he's an emphasis of how we will defend, and our ability to keep track of him will be really important. We have certain things that we'll try to do to try to make it difficult for him, but we know that limiting his space is the number one thing. We don't want him free and running at our back line and running at our goalkeeper like last game. That was not good enough. But we all know he's the greatest player to ever play the game. And the respect that we have for him, I think worldwide respect for who he is, and certainly the stadium will reflect that tomorrow. But it's always, I think, a privilege to play against a player like him. And our players will be up for it. They'll be excited. And the challenge is big. So we'll see if we can do a little bit better than we did in the first match.
You don't want to get lost in the shadow of Messi, but at the same time, you don't want to take for granted how incredible of a player he is. So, Ollie, if you're not going to man mark, what do you do with Messi? Hey, stop him. What do you do? Figure it out. Tell me, a
Well,
wise one, how we get this
I
guy
mean,
to just stop.
I go back to what Jonathan Nazario, I think it was, said before the first game, which is you can do whatever you want, and sometimes it doesn't matter, right? Like he's
Hmm.
just going to find a way anyway. So that's part of the reality with Messi. I don't think Canada were ever likely to man mark him. It's just not something that Jesse Marsh, I don't think, does a lot of. He's always been more kind of a zonal, in terms of how they press and how they defend. So it will be a group effort. It's going to need to be a group effort. I think Marsh touched on it there. You have to limit the space. You have to be very tight between your defensive and midfield lines. Sometimes, like we saw in the first game, that can mean that you're playing with a very high defensive line to try and squeeze that space, which obviously comes with its own risks. And then you can obviously try to prevent him from getting the ball in the first place. You have to try and cut off the supply in midfields, make sure that he's not receiving the ball easily in those pockets. And Lionel Scaloni, the Argentina coach, kind of talked about that a little bit, how he thinks Canada will press them and try and force them to play down the flanks. So they'll give it a good effort. I have no fear that Canada won't be prepared for this and won't be organized. It's just a case of whether it even matters with a player like this at times.
How are you marking Messi there, Alex?
Yeah, I mean the ever important question that a lot of great tacticians have tackled and come up short, and often by no fault of their own. I think two things stood out though in Canada's approach to the game against Argentina. They did pretty well for the first 45. Messi did get a bit of a half chance, and moments of magic, but then really where they kind of got away from their plan in the second half is they didn't take away his options. I think the biggest example is that first goal. Canada made a bit of a mistake on their own throw in, and they weren't reactive enough. It was like, oh, we made a mistake, flat footed, and that just killed you because Alvarez watching the goal back, he didn't have or no, it was McAllister. He didn't have a huge like runway on the Canadian center backs, but they're both flat footed, both surprised. Messi plays that pass. Like you have to be so reactive to his runs because that's where he really thrives in this Argentina team. They make great runs for him. They know if they go into space, make diagonal runs. He's the one guy in the world who can find you constantly. So be aware of those off the run shoulder. If Lautaro Martinez is starting, be aware that he's so good in behind, one of the best in the world. And the other thing too is you got to keep an eye on Messi. I think at times too, they just kind of were treating him like any old guy, which you can't do. He's just one player you can't do that with. Like you can't let him get breakaways. You can't let him slip off your shoulder. He's one of those guys that if he's there, you do have to compensate a bit for. And I thought they gave him a bit too much, or maybe not enough respect, where they're kind of just treating him like another guy, and he's just not a player that you can do that with. So I think if they don't do those two things better, and hey, maybe just a bit of you're also going to need a bit of luck if that can be on their side. Those are the kind of factors you'll be looking at.
Let's talk lineup here, guys, because we know, I mean, Jesse Marsh has tinkered a little bit. All in all, he sticks to, what he likes. But we have seen Schaffelberg go from bench to starter. We've seen Richie Larea play along the wing as opposed to on that back line. Obviously, we've seen Oso come in for Kone. But it still feels like they're not drastic changes by any means. He likes his tactics, he likes his setup, and he likes his certain guys. So why don't we just have a little bit of fun here? Because now they're in arguably the biggest game that they've ever played in. And how is he going to line up? So should we start them? Should we sit them? I will begin with you, Alex. Liam Miller, is he starting or is he sitting?
This one's harsh, but I'm gonna go sit, and most of it's not due to any fault of Liam Miller. I just think what I liked, as him as a bench option, you can kind of get a bit of different things with him. You want him to come in and be a bit more defensive. If you're nursing a 1-goal lead, you can throw him in. He'll give you cover in front of an Alphonso Davies. You get a bit of defensive responsibility. You need a goal. He can also come in and give you a bit of energy, some speed, some attacking prowess. And I think that's incredibly valuable versus, say, the other option, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, like a Jacob Schaffelberg. So I think for Miller, his own defensive awareness kills him a bit in this sense that it might be more valuable to have him for the last 30 minutes because you can kind of throw him into different game states.
Sitting or starting for you, Ollie?
Sit for Liam Miller. Yeah, I think he did a nice job coming off the bench last time out. I think he's done pretty well at this tournament, to be honest with you. So he is hard done by to be left out. But yeah, I think he'll get the last 30 minutes in this game, I would imagine.
Kind of like what you said here, Alex, when it comes to Jacob Schaffelberg. It's not that Liam Miller did anything wrong. It's just that Jacob
Right.
Schaffelberg in that position has been looking really good. And we were really concerned about like the Liam Miller and Alphonso Davies partnership and how they were creating that synergy. Would that be disrupted? But no, it doesn't seem to be at all. So I guess we kind of have our answer here. Jacob Schaffelberg, sitting or starting?
That's a start. He is going to start. And what I like is that we asked, after he had some great performance off the bench, is that just him going at tired legs, or is that him actually
Yeah.
tangibly making things happen? Then he went out and started against Venezuela. He was making things happen as well against Chile. Like he just is so direct. It's tiring. It's annoying for defenders to deal with. What I like is that even if it's only an honest 60, like against Venezuela, you could see he kind of started to tire out. He hit a bit of a wall. He gets subbed off. That honest 60 will open up the game later for Liam Miller to come in and do the job. So I just like what you get from Schaffelberg, that direct play, and then Canada will need it from the start in a game like this where early goals could be very valuable.
Ollie?
Yeah, undoubtedly start. The X factor that Canada has found in this tournament that teams have found it difficult to deal with is their pace, their directness, their ability to play in behind against defenses that aren't always the quickest and certainly can't keep up with the kind of athleticism they have in attack. And Jacob Schaffelberg, I think, has embodied that as much as anyone.
Ollie, I'm sticking with you when it comes to our boy Richie Larea. Is he sitting or is he starting?
Start. I think obviously there would be a conversation there if Tajon Buchanan was fit, but with him being out, I think Richie is the natural choice, and particularly in a game like this against an opponent like this, I think just his adaptability, his ability at times to, if they need to drop into a back five in certain moments, they can do it with Richie Larea on the pitch.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm going start. I've liked what he's brought as a starter. I mean, of course, you see he can go forward, he can be dangerous. He's been getting in the box in both games, getting some good chances. But then also what I like against Venezuela, you don't notice him because he's so calm, good defensively. You get that when you're playing a defender higher up the pitch, but he also has the attacking capabilities to not look out of place. I think in a game like
Mhm.
this where you're going to need a lot on both sides of the ball, it helps to have that extra defensive minded player out there.
Win us a
And credit,
penalty, Richie.
yeah.
That would help too.
And credit to Richie Larea. I mean, I wasn't sure what kind of fitness he'd be in. He played all of like, a handful or a couple handful of minutes this season, but he comes on in, looks good. And you could arguably say with Jesse Marsh opting to play, Alfonso Davies is a left back, Alistair Johnston looking superb as that right fullback. Like, where was Richie going to fit in? But he's kind of made a case for himself as well in that right wing back role. And yeah, he looks good. You're right. We could be having a discussion here if Tajon Buchanan wasn't injured, but Richie, he hasn't hurt himself either in playing in that spot. So credit to him for being able to do that and continue to be part of the conversation in the starting 11. Ollie, Jonathan Osorio, are you starting or sitting?
This is the toughest one for me, and I think this is the only real debate in the lineup in terms of what Marsh will be thinking. I'm going to start Jonathan Osorio. I think he's done really well the past couple of games coming into midfield with Eustachio. I think you can rely on him tactically. He has a very good understanding of what's being asked of him. He's tidy on the ball, doesn't make many mistakes. And I've been really impressed with the way a player who, earlier on in his career would play further forwards as a more creative-minded player has kind of become, a number 8 essential midfielder, certainly for Canada at this stage of his career. So I will go with Osorio, but, the man we're going to come on to, I think, in a second has a very strong case as well.
Well, then I'm just going to go right to him then, Alex, because if depending on what you say here, you're either agreeing with Ollie or you're disagreeing. Ismail Kone, does he start or does he sit?
I think conversely, I go start for Ismail Kone. I think he deserves a chance to get back in the lineup. And to the earlier Osorio point, I really liked him on the ball. He's been very good this tournament coming in, just calming down the game, giving Canada a bit of poise, experience. He knows when to put his foot on the ball and slow down the tempo. But there have been some concerns defensively in games where you can see where there's a moment where maybe his step's a bit aggressive or he just hasn't been able to keep up. But Venezuela or Chile haven't had the horses in midfield to do much. This Argentina team is, as we've mentioned, no joke in midfield. Just like some world-class players: Enzo Fernandez, Alexis McAllister, Rodrigo De Paul. Like pick your poison. Leandro Paredes might not even start, and he was excellent against Canada. Like this team is so good in midfield, and I think Ismail Kone, he just brings a bit more of the defensive side, which is a credit to his growth in the game. He'll also bring similar qualities on the ball, and I think these cameos off the bench have really helped him reset mentally. I love how calm he's looked on and off the field with his penalty last game. Give him a chance to go out and prove what he's all about. This is the kind of game where Ismail Kone can thrive.
Yeah.
Final one, guys, because this is a player who's become a hot topic throughout this tournament, and that would be Kyle Larin. Ollie, are you starting him or are you sitting him?
Undoubtedly starting Larin. I know he's got a bit of criticism from some people for for the lack of goals so far, and I do understand that like a striker's job is to score goals, and I think you can talk about all of the other things he does. Ultimately, he's got to start putting the ball in the back of the net. I think he'll be aware of that. But there are a lot of other things he does as well, not just defensively, but I think in linking the play and certainly being in the stadium and watching that Venezuela game, you could see, I think you get a much better view of just how active Kyle Larin and Jonathan David are in different moments and different aspects of the game. So I don't see anyone really who would persuade me to break up that partnership right now.
Alex?
Yeah, I think ultimately this is probably one of the hottest seats, but I still think he starts. You kind of keep that defensive side where you might not be seeing much of the ball. It might make sense to just compact 4-2-2-2, have the Larin on the field there for the big moments. But yeah, undoubtedly his pressure is on, and I mean, hey, no better game for him to get going, to get that goal. So I think for Larin, the fact that there were moments earlier in the tournament where it would have made sense to try something new. At this point, go with what you know.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, guys, we know Canada is the final CONCACAF team remaining here. Nobody would have thought out of the 6 who are at this tournament that it would be Canada. There's absolutely no surprise that the odds makers have them as heavy underdogs. Why not? Argentina, Copa, and world reigning champions. So, having said that, Ollie, where would Canada beating Argentina rank in terms of recent upsets at the highest level of international football? We don't want to go back into the 1920s, 30s, 40s, whatever, but just kind of in, recent history, like, can you think of something that would have been greater?
I had to think, and I'm struggling to think of one that would be as lopsided or as unlikely as this. Like, obviously, your mind goes back to Greece in 2004. They won the tournament, so Canada has a bit more to do, even if they pull off a miracle tonight. Um, Even then, like, I just think the nature of this Argentina team, being the defending world champions, the defending Copa America champions, the dominance that they've had as the number one team in the world over the past few years, like, uh, I can't think of much that would be a bigger shock, a bigger upset, especially at this stage of the competition. Obviously, we've seen Argentina lose to Saudi Arabia at the World Cup, but that tends to happen very early on in competitions. To do it at the semi-final stage, when, like I said, this team just seems to get better and seems to rise to the occasion as the tournament goes on. I can't think of a parallel for it, at least in recent years.
Okay. Can you think of any, Alex?
I honestly racked my brain, scoured, tried to, dive into the numbers. Like, I am struggling to find something. And like, this gives an idea of the like size of the task that Canada
Yeah.
has just for Canadian fans. Like, this is an incredible opportunity. Like, this Argentina team, when it's all said and done, no matter what happens the rest of this tournament in 2026, this might be one of the best teams of this generation. And they're not done. Like, this could go down in 20, 30 years. It's like, go back, like, yeah, that 2020, 22 Argentina team was, they were up there. Like, that's the all-time greats. Like, this team is so good. And yeah, when there's upsets in a tournament, they typically come early. It's like your Italy, Costa Rica in 2014. It's early in the
Mhm.
tournament. It didn't actually affect the tournament all that much. Costa Rica weren't able to go on a run later. Even for Greece, like, Greece weren't a bad team. I was looking back statistically, like in the ELO ratings. I love my numbers. It
Hmm.
wasn't like a bad, like, it was two teams very similarly ranked in Portugal and Greece going at each other. For Canada to win like this with the disparity, the gap in terms of just the history, the rankings, everything, this would be, I'd probably say it. It's not hyperbole to say this would be the biggest upset in international men's football, and gives an idea of what Canada would be up against tonight if they can pull it off.
Yeah, because like hypothetically speaking, if they beat Argentina, and let's just say they go on to win Copa, whoever they end up facing in the final, like, people are going to talk about the semifinal, and they're going to say, "Well, who did they face in the final?" Like, this is it, right? Like, in many ways, I feel like this is it. If you're able to beat Argentina, it would just absolutely be wild. And we know it's going to take a complete team effort. We know this, right? But at the same time, we do like to just kind of highlight some players here. And I'm wondering, in this semifinal game, though, Ollie, who would be a player you're watching on Canada who you think can be a real difference maker to make what many people feel is the impossible possible?
I think I've made this pick probably twice before in this tournament, and I'm going to make it again because I think it's just going to be a necessary part of the equation for Canada tonight. Max Crepeau, he's going to need to be
Mm.
great again. He's going up against probably the best goalkeeper in the world right now, in Emi Martinez, who's having a great tournament in his own right as well. Certainly the quarterfinal, he came up big. Crepeau is going to be called upon, I think, even if Canada defend as well as you could possibly imagine them defending in this game, he's going to need to have at least a couple of really big moments. So you need your goalkeeper at times against opponents like this to stand on his head. Crepeau has done a lot of that in this tournament. Bounced back from the goal he conceded against Venezuela to be the hero in that penalty shootout. Let's hope maybe we can get there again and have Martinez against Crepeau on penalties.
Woo, Alex.
I'm gonna go complete opposite side of the pitch. I'm gonna go Kyle Larin. I kind of
Okay.
mentioned earlier the seat's been a bit hot, and at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it's all your like, strikers. It's about the goals. It's been great to see the defensive contributions, and I think they definitely deserve praise. And they've been underrated. You see it in games, the work he's putting in. But at the end of the day, you get judged by goals because there's the question of, well, if he's working hard defensively, are there not other guys on the bench who can come in and work hard defensively and bring you a goal or two? And Kyle Aaron, 1 goal in his last 12. You want to see a bit more offensively. He's like, he's the all-time leading men's national team scorer. He's someone who's scored countless clutch goals. And even that 1 goal in his last 12, it was a clutch goal. Trinidad and Tobago. It shows that he can step up in these big moments. He did so to send Canada to this tournament. And one thing with strikers, though, for what it's worth, people have short memories with strikers. You can have a terrible tournament and you score the big goal to win your team the big game, or you score in the final. All
Mhm.
that is forgotten. People have short memories. You're only as good as your last game. For Kyle Aaron, this would be a great time to put a cap on what's been a pretty good tournament, as we said, off the ball defensively. You score a big goal like this, it's forgotten you didn't score against Venezuela. You didn't score against Chile. Boohoo. You scored a huge goal against
Mhm.
Argentina to potentially one of the biggest upsets of all time. And hey, in a game like this, Canada's defense will only get them as far as a penalty shootout, where again, you're going up against one of the best in the world in that regard. A Kyle Aaron goal
Mm.
could do a lot more. So I think it would be absolutely massive for him to step up and, prove a lot of people wrong with a big, big goal like he's very capable of doing.
It's the stuff of lore. And like case in point, guys, Miracle on Ice 1980 hockey. Everyone remembers the Americans beating USSR. That was semifinal. Do you even know who they beat in the final to
Finland,
actually win?
fun fact, I
Finland.
think.
Right? Nobody knows
Finland?
it's Finland.
I did not know that.
They think they think it's the Russians. They're like, well, that was Miracle on Ice. That would be this. Like, that's what I mean. Like, if you could beat
Mm.
Argentina, people aren't talking about the final. They're talking about what you were able to do in the semifinal, which is crazy. But let me, I mean, everything that we're saying, I feel like I know your answers, but I want it out in the ether. Do you think Canada's going to keep this close, or do you think Argentina? Because as much as Canada has grown in this tournament, they've looked at tape. Argentina's done it too. So do you think Canada, Alex, can keep this close, or do you think Argentina's just going to blow it wide open?
I think it keeps it close, and there's multiple factors I think that look at it. You can kind of look at it all sides. I think the first off is it's rare to see tournament semifinal blowouts. I think at this stage, if you make it this far, you've got a relative baseline of competency. You've usually got a good defensive line. Like it's going to be a close competitive game between two teams that deserve to be at this stage of the tournament. From a Canadian perspective too, it helps that they've played Argentina. It helps that Canada's been solid defensively. It helps that they've gone toe to toe with top teams before. So from their perspective, I've struggled to see a scenario where they're blown out. And even from Argentina's perspective, like for them to blow Canada out, they're going to need to get going offensively. And to be fair, they've been close. They lead the tournament in XG. They've certainly been unlucky in a few games not to score more. Canada game, probably the biggest among them. But also they've only I say this only because I'm sure Canada would love this. They've only scored 6 goals in 4 games, which is middle, like it's 4th or 5th in the
Mm.
tournament. Argentina also hasn't been blowing teams out of the water like they can, and you kind of saw it against Ecuador in the quarters.
Ollie?
I don't think the score will be a blowout. I would be surprised, and obviously it would be a bit of a disappointment if that's the case. I do think that Argentina, there is the potential that Argentina, in terms of their control of the game, you could describe it as a blowout. Like you look back at the 2022 World Cup, right, and they beat Croatia 3-0 in the semi-final. And then in the final, they completely played France off the pitch and only scored 2 goals. They probably should have had more. And Mbappe came in and bailed France out, or nearly bailed France out near the ends to get it to extra time. But those were dominant, comprehensive performances at the most important stage of the tournament. And that is certainly not out of the question tonight. We have to give this Argentina side that kind of respect. But I do think Canada can compete, and I don't think it'll be 4-5-0.
Do you think all the goodwill, all the positive vibes would go out the window if it does end up being a blowout? I mean, from a financial standpoint, the Canadian team is going home with minimum $8 million. Canada Soccer, I mean, doing well in these tournaments is actually a good thing, great thing, contrary to what some people may say. And obviously, the country's kind of rallied around this team. If it's a blowout, though, do you think a lot of goodwill gets lost?
I really hope not, because what they've done
Mhm.
shouldn't be forgotten, regardless of what happens tonight. The fear in this country is always that as soon as they lose, or as soon as there's a disappointment, it's not that everyone piles on them, because that would show that people still care about them. It's that there's just indifference, right? And everyone forgets about them until the next big thing 2 years away, which obviously will be 2 years away in this case at the 2026 World Cup. So I think this team deserves more than that. I think they've done something really special. And I hope it leads to more people, at least a chunk of people who have watched this tournament coming away and saying, I'm going to watch their next game as well, as opposed to just showing up 2 years from now.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying they're playing with house money, but sometimes the lasting impression can kind of be a little bit bitter if it's not a good one. But at the same time, this is absolutely incredible what they're doing. And I think it is a stepping stone. I don't think it's lightning in a bottle by any means with this team, because we've been following them for so long. Jacob Schaffelberg, as we know, has been quite the story. When he did an interview, he talked about how he's expecting a baby girl. And he went on to say, not that I'm going to force her to go into soccer, but love for her to play, and she's going to play for the Halifax Tide. So the Halifax Tides went, we hear you. So they put this out. Dear baby Schaffelberg, please accept this letter as a contract offer for February 2042. Position to be determined. We look forward to being a part of your future soccer success. Great stuff, guys. Can't wait. Canada, Argentina. Be sure to join us on our YouTube channel for our post-game reaction show.